Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome to the April convening, a little bit convening. We're excited for this conversation and extremely honored to have Flo with us for this meeting. We've got about an hour with Flo, and as part of this conversation, we're really hoping to dive a bit deep into the work of Sustainable Harvest International, the journey that has led to 25 years of this organization, or almost 25 years, if I'm not wrong, of the organization.
Yep.
And really kind of talk about that journey, especially because for many of us, this is maybe year 1, year 2, year 3 of our journey. And so it's kind of a beautiful way to learn from the experience of someone who's been building it for a while now. I'll do a quick kind of formal intro of Flo, and then I'll pass it to Gil to kind of also introduce Flo and their relationship as well. Flo is the founder and as of right now, the strategic director of Sustainable Harvest International. As the organization's chief visionary and networker, Florence, or Flo, is leading SHI's Million Farm Transformation Scaling Up Initiative. This is the initiative that you all read a bit about in this article that we've shared with you. She got her start in nonprofit work and serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama before founding SHI in 1997. Flo is passionate about finding better ways to help the world's farmers live better while regenerating the planet. This passion and acuity continually revitalize the staff, board, participants, donors alike, and everyone else that Flo's been in conversation with. It's very, very obvious after a few minutes in conversation for sure. In addition to zipping around the world, spreading the good word about what SHI does and making the connection. Flo lives in her family with her family in an environmentally friendly house on 30 acres of gardens and forest in Surrey, Maine, which is, I believe, where Flo was calling in from today.
Yep.
So just an honor to have you here, and I would love for Gail to also share a few words and kick us off with the conversation.
Oh my gosh, Flo, it's just always so great to see you, and I don't see you enough. And
Agreed.
it's just really nice. I've seen you twice now, maybe in this month. Oh my gosh,
Yes, I feel very lucky.
I know, me too. And I'm just so grateful for your time and your expertise. I know that you're busy, and you're speaking in lots of places. And this group is a very special group to Abhi and I, because it's full of passionate social justice, social entrepreneurs who are starting off, right? They're thinking about pilot programs. They're thinking about what it means to live in a community where every day they turn and they see a problem they want to solve, right? And we just try to help foster that and catalyze that by thinking small, taking small steps, and also connecting with people like you who understand that you got to sometimes work at home. You got to sometimes scramble. You got to be pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. You got to be constantly looking for forms of resilience and persistence, right, in this world. So I know that you are going to be inspiring to them and your story. So you're speaking to a choir that's just forming, right? So one of the things, and thank you again for being here. One of the things I wanted to start off with is just to kind of go back to that time when you were living, alongside a community in Panama, right? And you were noticing, right? You were kind of doing your own needs assessment, right? Noticing what was needed. And then you went home, or you went to New Hampshire, and you said, I got to do something about that. And there was that fire and there was that passion. And you, if I understand correctly, you kind of did a lot of cultivating of relationships to kind of get things going while you were, building this. And then you did a pilot program. So I know you're right now, 3,000, smallholder, farmers, and you're going to do this million farm transformation. But take us back to those first years, right? What was it like to cultivate the relationships, right? Help our group understand really the importance of that kind of early foundation building to start.
Sure. Well, I guess the most important relationships were before I started Sustainable Harvest, when I was a Peace Corps volunteer living in Panama. And probably many of the people on this call today are working in their own communities, which they know well. But for me, it was particularly important to just be a sponge and learn as much as I possibly could from the farmers, from the people in the community in Panama where I was living. And I think that's true, whatever our situation, that if we're going to be working with people, working for people, that really listening to them and learning as much as we can about them and their perspectives, and trying to take in as much of that knowledge as possible is really key. So that, and I'm still learning. I'm still always humbled to be on a farm after 30 years of doing this work, and still be learning new things every time. But at any rate, learning as much as I could that way was certainly the foundation for all of the work that was to come. And then after that, I actually, before starting Sustainable Harvest, I worked for another nonprofit where I gained a lot of experience. I worked for two nonprofits after Peace Corps. One was working in an area totally different from what I wanted to work in. I wanted to be working with farmers, planting trees. This was a corporate accountability organization that was doing a very different type of work, important, but not my passion. But seeing how a very well-run organization operated, learning about the management, the administrative side, and especially the fundraising, which was the area that I worked in, was so important. And I don't think I would have been successful in starting Sustainable Harvest had I not had that experience. From there, I went on to working for an organization that seemed to, that had a mission very much in line with what I wanted to be doing. It turned out I found fairly quickly that organization was not really doing what it said it was doing. There was a lot of incompetence and corruption. But it was very frustrating at the time, but I'm also very glad for that experience because I think I learned about a lot of the pitfalls that I wanted to avoid when I did end up starting Sustainable Harvest. And also through that organization, I ended up starting to make connections with organizations in Honduras, in Nicaragua, in Belize. And then of course I'd maintained my connections in Panama. And so again, I was trying to be a sponge, absorbing all the knowledge I could from the organizations that I connected with, from the farmers I connected with in these other countries in Central America when I was working for another organization. Eventually, when it became clear that I wasn't going to be able to shift things within this other organization and get them to actually do what they said they were doing, and when they told me I should just raise money and not worry about how the money was spent, basically, I said, all right, sorry, I can't do that. And that was with the catalyst for me to say, all right, I've thought about starting my own nonprofit. I think it's now or never. I still thought it was unlikely that I would do it. I still didn't have a lot of experience, still had fairly limited knowledge. And I had no money. And so those all seemed like insurmountable walls for me to get over. But it turned out that on the day that it really came down to for me to decide whether to do this or not, I got an email from a man in Switzerland who I'd met on my last trip to Central America. He was there as a tourist with some friends, and we had traveled together a little bit. He had seen where I'd worked in the Peace Corps. And I didn't expect to ever hear from him again, but he sent me an email on this particularly key day. And he asked how things were going. And email was a brand new thing at the time, so just getting an email at all was miraculous. Um, and I told him what was happening, and he said, well, open a bank account and I'll wire you some money tomorrow to start your new nonprofit. And I thought, wow,
Wow.
if this guy has the confidence in me to do that, although I didn't know whether he was going to send $10 or $100 or what he'd be sending. Turned out he sent $6,000, and it was there in that bank account the next day, which was a tremendous amount. Well, still, it's a lot, and then it was even more. And I thought, well, if he's got the confidence in me, I better try to muster the confidence in myself to see if I can do this. And at the time, I was working at a furniture store that sold futons. And I asked the two guys who owned the store, can I start my nonprofit? And when there's not customers and not a truck to unload, can I use your office to start this nonprofit? And they said yes. And when I realized I would need a board of directors, I asked if they would be on the board of directors and help with the financial side of things, since I knew nothing. I knew not a thing about bookkeeping or anything else like that. And so they joined the board. They let me continue to work so I could pay my bills selling futons until the organization got to the point where it could pay me a salary. And I got out a book from the library, literally called How to Start a New Nonprofit. It's a surprisingly small book, but it took you through the basics. You need a board of directors. You need your financial plan. You need this, you need that. And I just went through the book chapter by chapter. Put things in place. I had connections with other people who were interested in Central America, who'd been involved in human rights and other campaigns focused on Central America. And so I was able to get a couple of them to join the board of directors. And I went to the university nearby, to the natural resources department, and I found the administrative assistant who I figured would know everything. And I said, is there a professor here who would be a good board member for me? And she said, oh yes, you want Dan Zarin. So I went in and asked him to join the board, and he did. He was our first board chair. Then he brought another professor with him. She was a later board chair. And then I started fundraising, and I started by sending letters to everybody I had ever met in my life, all of my friends, connections, long distant relatives, my parents' friends and connections, and then friends of friends. And so little by little started the donations coming in that way. I got my friends to come and help put together bigger mailings. When we started to send out some bigger mailings, I gave them beer and pizza, and we tried not to get too much of that on the letters, and sent them out that way. Later, we went to a retirement community where the older people were looking for things that they could do to contribute, and they helped fold those letters and put the stamps on the envelopes. And I worked 7 days a week from sunup to sundown in those early years, spending about probably half my time on the program side of the work and about half my time on the administrative and fundraising and communications. And then little by little, we were able to, and the board helped me a lot with, as I alluded to before, with the things that I didn't know about. They taught me, or they did it themselves. And then eventually, little by little, we were able to add staff to take on different pieces. And so all the pieces that I was doing as best I could, flying by the seat of my pants, not entirely knowing what I was doing, it got us by until we were able to hire people who could do it better. And I don't know how long I should go on, but that's kind of
that's great. I love the stories. I love the details. I love the, I want to say theme, right? Of just really just doing everything at first, right? Just doing everything, just asking, not being
Yep.
afraid to ask. Just say, would you, I mean, to walk into somebody's office that you don't know, a complete stranger, and say, would you be on my board? And that sense of trust, and maybe a little bit of naivete, really, but also just doing it. And
Yep.
and at those little steps incrementally build up, right? And then also the theme of some luck. I mean, maybe not
Yes.
full luck, but you didn't expect that you'd get that email from that man in Switzerland, but because he had met you and he connected with you. So it just really has a big theme of commitment to what you want to do, just like get it done, right? Have those and that passion.
There was definitely luck, and I definitely appreciate the fact that I was in a position to do this, that not everybody has the luxury of being in. My parents had paid for me to go to college. They offered me, and they had an extra room in their house that I could set up as an office when I wasn't using the office at the futon store.
Yeah.
And I knew that if things failed, that they would take care of me, and I'd be able to feed myself, or they would feed me. And so I was not risking as much as I think some people may need to risk to do something like this. And so I'm also very cognizant of that, and grateful that I was born into a situation that made it easier for me than for some people to do this, and probably easier for me than for some people that would do it better. So that is luck. But I took the opportunity I had and tried to do the best I could with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it. It sounds like a lot has been done with it. Avi, do you want to ask a question next?
I have one follow-up question, and then I'll pass back to you. I think I wanted to talk about that grant, the $6,000 that you mentioned. It's such a brilliant story. I mean, the name Little Big Fund is inspired by the concept of micro grants, and like the idea of smaller kind of support that really catalyzes big impact. And so that story is really inspiring. Going into the detail, and from as much as you can kind of remember of that 6,000, you get that money, you're in this place to get started. What do you do next? What's your first step with that funding? Do you go to plan, start building relationship? How does that kind of get started for you?
Well, a little more of the background. I talked about this other organization that I had worked for that wasn't really doing what they said they were doing. And when I was working for them, I had gone to their board of directors and said, you're responsible. This organization should really be doing what it says it's doing. There should be a plan. There should be a program being implemented according to the plan. And so they actually did get a plan together. And then based on that, I had gone to Honduras, and I had hired 2 people in Honduras to work with a group of, I think, 50 farmers. And it was when I came back from that trip, I found that the founder and director of this organization had gotten rid of his entire board. He threatened to kill their pets. It was really a horrifying situation. So he got rid of all but one board member, the one board member who was willing to be a rubber stamp, got rid of all the others, and then said, okay, Flo, you're done trying to change things here. You just stick to fundraising and tell those guys in Honduras not to expect to get paid. And so that was really what pushed me, is I certainly wasn't going to keep working for this organization anymore, but I also felt really responsible because even though it was under the auspices of this organization, I had been the one who had hired these 2 guys. I had met with the farmers and said, we're going to provide you with this support. So I felt personally responsible. And that was a big motivating factor. So when Dieter sent the $6,000, I immediately wired 3,000 of it down to Honduras. And that was enough for the two guys I hired to keep them going for the first few months. They took buses, they walked long distances, they couldn't have any transportation of their own for quite a while. I still remember when we got our first motorcycle so they could reach the farms more easily. That what a big deal that was. And then the first truck later on. And so 3,000 went to them, kept them going the first few months. The other 3,000, that kept me going the first few months. I used it for fees to get incorporated, to apply for tax exempt status. I bought letterhead. I paid the postage for sending out letters to all those people I talked about who I'd hoped would then start sending the donations in. So that was pretty much how that first 6,000 was spent, and then more started to come little by little, and then eventually we were getting enough in that it was enough for a small salary for me, and I could quit the futon store. That was a big step and very exciting.
Indeed, and especially when you're trying to prioritize things that keep the engines going, it's hard to imagine being able to kind of, just focus on this 24/7. It's quite difficult, and especially when you were talking about like working at the store while trying to do this, that must have been a pretty tricky place. So going
Right,
from
but
that 6,000 to like that next step was probably
I was young. I wasn't married. I didn't have a child at the time. My parents were still young enough. I didn't need to worry about caring for them, and sort of all those things have changed over time. And I work just a sort of a normal work schedule now for quite some time, and I couldn't put in the hours that I did now, like I did then. So I think it depends also on your situation in life, and and what are you giving up? What are you willing to give up?
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for indulging on that question as well. Gail, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah. Let's see. I have another question, and I know later we'll open up so that our participants can ask you questions. I wanted to ask you, I've heard the term smallholder, farmer, right?
Yes.
Often. And I know that that you have 3,000 of them. And so can you just help me and some of us, maybe others, where did that terminology come from, that smallholder? And then how does that fit in today's, sort of semantics of, multinationals and, agro firms, and what's important about that term smallholder and holding on to that in terms of your ideology and in terms of the work that you do and in terms of what maybe we want to remind ourselves when we're working on a grassroots level?
Well, smallholder may have come out of the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. I'm not sure, but it refers to a holder of a small amount of land who's farming that land, using that land. Sometimes we use the term small scale farmer as well, because sometimes that's clearer to people what we're talking about. And there's no clear definition of what is meant by smallholder, but I think usually people are talking about farms that are maybe around 5 hectares. And with sustainable harvest, our average farm size has been a bit less than 5 hectares. Actually, it's been about 8 acres has been the average size. So what would that be? That would be about 3 hectares, I guess. I'm terrible at math doing those conversions, but and we focus on working with the smallholders because we feel like they themselves have the most to gain from getting some technical assistance and integrating regenerative agroecology, agroforestry practices into their farming. most of the world's hungry people are in rural areas, which always feels ironic and it's just a terrible shame, where in rural areas people should be able to be growing food and feeding themselves. Also, smallholder farmers feed most of the world. It's not the big agro businesses and the big farms of thousands of hectares. They're not the ones producing most of the food, or they're not feeding most of the world. It's the smallholder farmers. And for me, my primary motivation is to preserve the environment and regenerate the environment, because I feel like if we don't do that, nothing else is really going to matter. Humanity is going to go off a cliff, and the planet's just not going to support human civilization anymore. So my focus has always really been on the environment. And smallholder farmers, I feel, are the ones that are, even though they don't control as large areas of land to be regenerated and restored, they're the ones that are most likely to adopt these practices, because they lend themselves to a smaller scale operation. And it's a fairly easy transition for the smallholder farmers to bit by bit add in these agroecology, agroforestry, regenerative practices, and in so doing, produce more crops, a greater diversity of crops, produce a better diet for themselves, produce a better income for themselves. Whereas if we were to focus on the really large farms, they cover more land, but they have millions of dollars invested in a destructive way of farming, and it's just a much bigger ask of them to make this transition to the types of farming practices that I think we need to keep the planet livable. And certainly that transition needs to happen as well, but I hope it will also happen in a way where we move away from the really large farms for the most part, and to smaller, medium-sized farms. There's a place certainly for farms bigger than 5 hectares, but I feel like the focus of our food system should be on the smallholder farmers. And I've forgotten the question, but I hope I answered it somewhere in there.
No, I think that's really, no, I think you answered it really well. It helped me. It also, it speaks to, just an overall approach of how smaller communities, neighborhoods, right, villages, that sometimes if you work first with like what's right around you, like a small, neighborhood can get together to make change, and then the next neighborhood does it, and the next neighborhood does it. So the idea of the power of smallholder farming, and then 3,000 of them, then having similar practices, they're making big change, right? So again, I kind of come back to that little to big, and, pilot to 3,000. And if someone here is working in, in a different field, let's say they want to change the educational system in their country, there's a lot of value to say, I'm going to do it in this one school, and then have the next practice in the next school. So I was just curious to hear about the power of that term, smallholder, because it might seem like it's not powerful, but when a lot of smallholders get together incrementally, they've created something really big. And I think that's probably been a guiding practice for you, right? And of course,
yes. So as I said, collectively, they are feeding most of the world. There are 500 million smallholder farmers around the world. And also collectively, if they made this shift to regenerative agroecology, agroforestry practices, they could draw down 6 billion tons of carbon out of the atmosphere every year. And that is not the solution by itself for climate change, of course, but it could play a really significant role in stabilizing the climate and buying us more time to stop putting carbon into the atmosphere. So yeah, certainly collectively, there's a tremendous amount to be done, and it's what's pushed us towards our big audacious goal of impacting 1 million farms by 2030 is
Yeah, yay.
yeah, because we've gone sort of little by little. We've reached the 3,000 farm mark very slowly, with a few more farms every year, and that's been good. But I also feel that none of it's going to matter if we don't, if humanity doesn't deal with climate change, and if we don't all do everything we can to address climate change. Those 3,000 farms are going to be doomed. And so that's why we're now thinking, how can our still relatively small organization have the biggest impact possible and help the largest number of farmers possible to make this shift to these other farming practices. And so that's why we're now thinking differently, and not thinking about can we hire one more trainer so that we can work with 30 more farmers. We're talking to government agencies now and saying, okay, look what we've been able to do on these 3,000 farms the last 25 years. Can we partner with you? Can you partner with us to allow all of, or most of the smallholder farmers in your country to make the same transition, so that you can reduce poverty in your country, reduce hunger in your country, meet your targets for climate change for your country, meet your targets for biodiversity for your country. So we're talking to government agencies about that. We're also talking to businesses who are looking for a supply chain that won't continue to destroy the planet, but will actually help the planet, be fair to farmers. And we hope they want that. It's always hard to find the companies that aren't looking only at financial profit for themselves. But I think that is starting to shift. So we're looking at whether we can work with them, partner with them to reach larger numbers of farmers also, and other nonprofit organizations who would like to partner with us to reach the farmers that they want to reach.
Awesome. I know you're going to do it too. I know you're going to take big giant leaps now with those, and those governments need to listen to how you've done that. Yeah. Abby, I'm sorry. Did you want to ask a question next, or do we want to open it up?
Let's see. I think we have maybe one last question. I have like 7 more questions. It's amazing. I think a lot of what you're talking about is inspiring, and I personally find it really inspiring to look at that journey in a way that's quite sustainable. I mean, like the work that you do with the farming communities, a lot of the model behind Sustainable Harvest International seems quite sustainable, and not trying to go from 100 to 10,000 within year 1, and all of those kind of numbers that a lot of organizations often struggle with. And one, you mentioned the how of getting to that 1 million number. And I think the one thing that was interesting for me was reading in this article about these farmer mentors. And so you seem to be employing farmer mentors in communities, and that seems to be one of the big hows of how you're actually reaching more farmers in communities, is rather than having these maybe program managers or field officers, you're incorporating this concept of local leaders, these proximate leaders. Why and why is it important for you to start doing that, and how is that starting to impact those numbers, and especially as you're projecting to allow you to kind of get to that 1 million? I'm not sure if I'm clear, but
yeah, definitely. And so to reach the 1 million mark, we're taking a 3-pronged approach. One is to continue doing what we've been doing, do more of that as a sort of a baseline to build from, to compare against, to make sure that changes we make are really getting us greater impact. Another one of the 3 pillars is this idea of replicating partners, where we collaborate with the governments, with the businesses, with the other nonprofits, to create a program based on ours, but to reach both of our goals. And I think that's probably going to be the primary way that we reach the 1 million farms if we do it. But then we're also have a pillar of innovation, to test changes to our methodology that will allow us to get the similar impacts on more farms for less money. So we've got a number of ideas for that. One of them is the farmer mentors, which is certainly, not a new idea invented by us. There have been many farmer to farmer training programs out there. We're looking at, can we adapt it to our model and our methodology? And there's always been concern about how well it would work, because ours isn't a simple program. We're not bringing in one practice, one product. It's a very broad program with many interconnected pieces. So we're testing out whether we can adapt it. And we're just starting our first pilot with it in Honduras this year. So it's too early to say, but our hope is that by having one of our professional trainers, extension agents, working with a group of mentor farmers, each of whom works with their own group of farmers. That way, instead of having our professional extension agents each working with 30 people, they'll be working with 100 farmers with the support of the farmer mentors. So that would be about a threefold cost savings for us if it goes as we hope. And obviously, if it costs us a third or even a half what it costs us now, we can reach 2 or 3 times as many farms for the same budget, and that would be desirable.
For sure. And it does seem like a very, the peer-to-peer mentoring and kind of teaching is such a key concept, I think, in agriculture, but in so many other fields. I think in education, that's coming up a lot more, and in other sectors as well. So I think it's definitely a good model that I think can be implemented. And I'm definitely excited to kind of learn more, especially how you're able to kind of reduce cost, because when you talk about the cost of doing all of this work and you kind of put this perspective, obviously, I think it was a 30 billion number, the whole perspective. And you mentioned how, obviously that's a very small number when you compare the cost of the impact on climate, and yet getting funders to pay for that is always a tricky place. So if you're able to do it more effectively, that's also
right.
Really impressive.
Yeah. And as you know, Abby, we're looking not at only reducing costs, but also at offsetting costs by bringing in a way to earn money as part of the program that would offset some of the costs, so that we don't have to rely entirely on philanthropic dollars or government dollars, or that the program can generate at least some of its own income.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking
that's where we've been glad to learn from you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's been great to have that exchange as well. I think talking of fundraising, and I know we didn't get too much into it in our initial questions, but we do want to open up for the rest of this brilliant group to ask some questions. Elizabeth, I saw a couple of really wonderful questions on the chat. Would you feel comfortable coming off mute, maybe asking a couple of your questions?
Hi, Abby.
Hi, welcome.
Yes, my question was, thank you so much, Flo, for sharing your story. It's such a beautiful story. And you mentioned while you were starting, you were doing almost everything, and it happens to most of us that you're doing everything from admin work to fundraising. Did you make any mistakes, and how did you correct that? And were you afraid of of maybe making mistakes that will make you not get any grants or something like that? Yeah. My other question was, how did you get the
can I answer the one
confidence
question and then go on to the next? Because I'm afraid I'll
Okay,
forget.
no problem, no problem. Yes, yes.
And let's see, since you asked about whether I made any questions, I made any mistakes. How many hours do we have? Uh, I've made lots of mistakes along the way, and I think that you can't be afraid of that. Obviously, you try to not make mistakes. You try to learn from others' mistakes, from others who are doing things well. But when I think in any situation, you're going to make mistakes, and especially when you're diving in, trying to do something new, trying to start something new. And we've just taken all those stumbling blocks as stepping stones to build a better organization. And I don't think that we've ever been penalized by funders for that. I think at least the funders that we've dealt with are all thoughtful, understanding people, and as long as it was evident, which I think it always was, that we were doing our best, and that we were taking steps to correct the mistakes that we have made, that all the funders I've dealt with have been understanding and appreciative that that we're honest about our mistakes and learning from them and using them as an opportunity to do better.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. My other question was on how you were able, I think you mentioned, but I think I didn't get it clear, how you were able to pick the board members, because I think the biggest challenge that we have is coming up with board members that are going to support the cause and who are also going to give back to the organization and not to just come and take back. So how exactly were you able to vet, or how were you able to get these board members on board?
Sure. And I think the culture around nonprofit boards seems to be different in different countries. And so I've had experience here in the US with choosing our board for Sustainable Harvest International's headquarters in the US. And for the most part, I think we've done very well with the board members. They're people that we could see their background, and that they have a background of service and wanting to give back, and having a commitment to the issues that we're working on. And so I think that has gotten us. I have no real complaints with any of our board members. There's some personalities that have been a little bit difficult at times. I think the intentions were still good. The personalities sometimes were just a little difficult, and I think that's something that I've learned along the way. You want to take into consideration as well, so that board meetings don't get bogged down in issues around personalities and egos and so on. And you want the board meetings to be effective and use their time well. We've also, in our past, we've established in-country organizations in some of the countries where we've worked. And there we had a harder time, maybe in part because we were one step away. And maybe these are some of the mistakes that maybe we've made. I tend to be a very trusting person. And so maybe we didn't do as much due diligence as we should have. And we have had board members in the past in some of our country programs where it became fairly evident that people joined the board to see what they could get as opposed to what they could give. And then sometimes that ended up working in conjunction with our country directors who we were paying to run the programs. And so that caused difficulties for us, and is sort of, you know, one of the things I really wish I had done better earlier on. And now we just have a much stronger vetting process with more people involved. I think a big problem there was that we trusted to a great extent, almost entirely, our country director to choose the board members. And so now it's a more extensive group process. And I think that's been very helpful to never put all of the trust in one person, whoever they are. I wouldn't want all the trust for big decisions like that put on myself, even though I trust myself. But I think just having several people involved is very helpful.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I think we have a common problem, trusting so fast. Then you trust people who talk big things and great things, and you find yourself making mistakes in the course of picking the board members. So thank you so much for sharing that. Finally, maybe I'm currently running a project, and this is my first project managing a grant. And sometimes in the course of doing it, you have to make decisions, you have to change probably something that you had put in, and something that probably you had not budgeted for, and you really have to put it in the budget. So you have to make decisions. Sorry. Did you ever find yourself at the point where you are managing your first grant, confused about which thing to do and which not to do? And how did that affect the end results of your project? And how have you been able to work on that to make sure that you are more confident in managing grants and get the best impact or most impact of that grant that you are managing? Yeah.
Well, when we apply for our grants, we always try to, of course, do as much planning ahead of time as possible, so that we're asking for a grant for work that's been well planned out. That said, even the best planned projects and work can have things come up that just couldn't be anticipated or weren't anticipated for whatever reason. And again, I think we've been lucky, or I don't know if we're lucky, maybe it's just that funders generally are thoughtful people. So we've been able to go back and say, this is what we planned, but for X, Y, and Z reason, we feel like it would be a better use of the funds to take this portion of them and do something else. And I don't think we've ever had a funder say, no, you have to stick with what you put in the grant proposal. I think as long as you have a good reason for it that you can explain, I would think it would be very unlikely that a funder would have a problem with that.
Wow, thank you so much.
You have to trust the funders too.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, and good luck with your work.
Thank you so much.
Definitely a two-way process with funders and the communication as well. I think we could probably do one really quick question and then we'll wrap up. So if anyone else has another question for Flo, feel free to come off mute. Joseph, go for it.
Hi, I was gonna ask quickly. So I was working in Haiti, and all the way in education and women's empowerment, a lot of farmers have asked us for help, and eventually I want to help them. So I was just wondering, how would we go about incorporating the agroforestry and sustainable agriculture? Because I'm not sure how well that's practiced right now at this point.
Well, I guess I would say ideally if that's not your focus area, that you would find an organization that is focused on that, and partner with them. These are the kind of partnerships that Sustainable Harvest is looking for. I don't know if we'd be the right partner in this case, or if it would make sense. I also know there's an organization that I believe does work in Haiti on very similar work called Groundswell International, I believe they're called. And so I would think they would be a good prospective partner, and they work with in partnership with a Haitian organization, the name of which I don't remember. But if I could put you in touch if that would be helpful. And then if not them, if they're not the right, there's other, thankfully, there are a lot of organizations getting into this work now. And there's networks where Regeneration International and some other regenerative agriculture networks that might be helpful for finding good partners.
Great. Yeah. I've heard of Groundswell. Yeah, I'd like to.
Yes, Steve Brescia is the director. A very nice guy. I haven't seen their work firsthand, but I would suspect that it's good work.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Oh my gosh, really? We only have 2 minutes left until the hour is up. Oh my gosh, I kept thinking, I thought I had, Abby and I, when we were planning for this, we said, okay, you come up with 3 questions and I'll come up with 3 questions and then we'll open it up. Well, I came up with like 9 questions even before we started talking. And then as I'm listening, I'm like, wait, I want to know more. I want to know more. So you've just been so helpful and informative and visionary. The idea of regenerative farming and changing climate. And I mean, just, it's all so inspiring. And I feel like at a loss for words, because it's like reading a book and I've read only the first chapter and I want to now sit down and binge read what you have to say. So thank you, Florence. And I also think that your comments are just inspiring in general. If there's someone here who's not working in the same field, but or in the same sort of passion area, there's so much to learn from someone who's had your experience and your thoughtfulness and your reflection. And it really means a lot to me that you have taken this time to really inspire this small but passionate group around the world who want to figure out, how do I keep going even when all the world is getting bigger and bigger in its problems? I want to make some kind of difference in my community. And I know that there's always a human connection involved, right? When you want to start something in that way to change the world. So thank you so much for your humanity and your connection to this group, and everybody for coming and being here when you're busy or in different time zones. And we'll be in touch some more. We're going to hopefully be able to share more about your work. Everyone knows how to follow you now. And we'll do a little summary of all of your insights. And we maybe, with your permission, we'll post some of your thoughts on a blog piece. And so just thank you so much, Flo, and everybody for being here, and Abby for organizing this.
Yeah, well, thank you to both of you for all of the good work that you do and for this opportunity. And so nice to see 7 more people that are getting started doing really good work that's needed in the world. Yeah. And it's so always good to be reminded of how many people are out there doing good work. And so I appreciate everybody on this.
And having a go again, right? Have a go at it. I think all of that spirit is important. Yeah.
For sure. Thank you once again, Flo. And we'll look forward to staying in close touch and collaborating with you, of course, on many different fronts. And everyone else, thank you for being here. We'll get in touch with you for the next convening and other events that are coming up as well. As always, we really appreciate your engagement, your passion and the work that you're all doing. So have a wonderful rest of your April, and we'll probably see you back here in May. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Best wishes, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.